System.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I'm your host, Alex, and I'm joined by my friends Jem and Matt. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content. Or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. I am going to change things up now. I've got a big question to ask you all. How has writing changed over gaming's history? Games have gone from being side-scrolling 2D to big 3D, cinematic, story-driven masterpieces. So how is that reflected in the history of games? And what does it mean? Is it more important in certain genres than other genres?
If you go right back to the early games, like on the Spectrum, Amiga and things like that, they were only text-based. So yes, there was actually quite a lot of writing going on there, because
that's very true.
They were basically choose your own adventures, weren't they? And then we had the rise of the arcade games, and I think story-based games almost died a death.
Yeah.
And it feels that in the last decade, we've seen a gradual increase of the story-based games. And I think probably along with the increase of actors willing to voice characters, we've seen these big production concepts where every character is voiced, and we're going into games disappointed when that isn't what's happening. And Baldur's Gate 3 was a very good example of that. It's extremely complex, and you've got all these different options going on, and so huge amounts of time writing and narrating. And of course, Baldur's Gate 3 does have a narrator all the way through, so they definitely don't show, they do tell. I think we've seen this sort of ebb and flow of writing in games, and obviously then we've got these sort of more immersive games. We've already mentioned The Witcher, and things like Disco Elysium as well, which is depressing but it's extremely well written and very quirky and distinct in its approach. So yeah, I think we have definitely seen changes, and I think you're right, perhaps it reflects what the audience, well, obviously it reflects what the audience wants, but perhaps it does reflect something about what society wants, not to get too deep and meaningful.
I had an example, I think, of one of the best ways to look at it, really, I guess. I'm going to start talking about it again, you can probably guess, is Tomb Raider, obviously, because you've got the classic era, you've got the middle era, and then the more modern trilogy now. And the differences with the writing in those is quite interesting to think about, because obviously the protagonist, Lara, is the same character, but she's very different for each of those iterations. I always like to think about that as an example, because classic Lara is totally different to modern Lara in terms of the characters themselves. Like, obviously, they were trying to portray Lara as someone who was very capable and competent and intelligent and strong, and those things will come across in each of the iterations. But I think from the middle, or maybe from Angel of Darkness onwards, I think they wanted to give Lara more depth and more background, and explored her family, and there were these wider questions asked about how did she get to be like this, what happened, what was her past like, and exploring that kind of thing through the games has been interesting, because there's several interpretations of Lara's parents. Lara's parents have always been a plot point, even if it was very small in the classic games. But yeah, I always find that quite an interesting one to think about.
Lara Croft is a great example, actually, and something I would really like to see a study done, I'm sure somebody's done one, of how her writing has changed over time. Because, of course, she has been around for such a long time that she's been present when we've gone through quite a lot of social changes in attitudes to women and also to class as well, because, of course, she's from this very wealthy family and background, and as well to the idea of plundering ancient
that's very true.
sites. Yeah. It would be really fascinating to actually analyse how has Lara Croft changed from a writing perspective, rather than we always just talk about what's happened to her boobs.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to think about what's happened to how she speaks, the words she uses, the way that her story is told. It'd be fascinating.
Yeah, I kind of equate it a little bit to the same thing happened to James Bond, right? In that you've got those different eras of James Bond, and you have 60s James Bond who behaves and is a certain way. You then have 80s Bond, you have 90s Bond, and then you have obviously 2000s Bond, right? And the thing that is interesting about James Bond, I know Alex, me and you have spoken about this a little bit, is that James Bond is always the constant in that story. He doesn't change. He doesn't do anything differently. He is always the same. And it's the world around him that kind of changes and develops. And it's kind of interesting that they, in the later James Bond films, almost try and do something similar to what we saw with Lara Croft, right? Do people who are watching the James Bond film want to know more about him, want to know about the man, want to know about the kind of what makes him tick? Or are they just interested in watching him run really fast and shoot people? You're kind of playing into what do your audience want when you're faced with that, I suppose.
People are very attached, aren't they, to those characters? I mean, if anyone suggests making changes to James Bond, it's like, you can't do that. He's a national treasure. And yet, there have been changes over the years.
This leads perfectly into an anniversary celebration topic, because this month is the 20th anniversary of the first God of War game.
I was going to mention God of War as well.
For the first, all of the games, the 4 PlayStation games, and then 2 epic PSP games, Kratos was just this rage and vengeance machine with very, 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 very little apparent depth to him. Cut to 2018, Cory Barlog, who worked on the first game and directed the second original game in 2007 or 8, he comes and retroactively adds all of this depth to Kratos. And then that is built on and concluded with the Ragnarok DLC and Kratos going back through his past, and that's the apex in how you take something from the past that probably was very shallow at the time, and then you can retroactively add depth to that in the right way. The problem comes in that one way in which writing has never changed is that there is no standardized writing, like what the best writing is school. So like with gaming technology, with programming, with art, with sound design, technological advancements lead the way. You can't be making stuff for a PlayStation game now. You have to go, oh shit, programmers who are working in games now, who worked in them, started 30 years ago, their skill set has had to update. Whereas with writers, you can have the same person writing 20 years ago and writing today. They've been working the entire time, but there has been no qualification. Absolute. If you've got a PhD in writing, you can be not as successful as someone who's just writes something on their phone. But that's the problem with things changing, in that experience doesn't guarantee improving in quality with writing.
How do we avoid things like, when we think about bad writing, oftentimes there are things that come up maybe in video games a bit more. I don't know whether it's like the last 5-10 years, but I feel like quippiness is a really common occurrence within characters in films, games, TV. It's reached a point where it's become really annoying now. I don't know if it's just me, where characters are just really quirky and quippy. I think there's a fine line where it's fine and then it becomes really annoying. A really good example of where it's bad is, we talked about it on the pod, I think, the game Forspoken. That was really hyped up before it came out. I can't remember how many years ago it was now, but it really didn't do very well. And the character was overly quippy and just really angsty and annoyed about everything that she had to do in the game. So every quest she was like, well, why do I have to do it? And just moaning all the time. I don't know what was going on there. Maybe it was too heavily leaning into Marvel-esque dialogue. We've talked a lot about tropes in writing and stereotypical characters and complexes within characters. I've definitely talked a lot about the more modern Lara having a hero complex and how does that change the way we feel about her as a character. So are those things good to have? How far do we need to have them? Like, how much do we need to have them? And is there a point at which games are overly saturated with bad examples of writing?
I can probably boil it down to a fantastic quote from God of War Ragnarok, where it is one of Ratatoska's, his perfection element, which is his perfection or one of the other ones. And he just says, fewer words, greater impact. And that's something that should be branded onto every writer, especially writers who end up doing this kind of thing. And then I've just put it under the banner of millennial bullshit language. So my biggest thing is yeah, no, and no, yeah. That kind of thing, and saying like too much. And so then I was like this, and then they were like this. I'm not the arbiter of what good writing is, so this is just all opinion and stuff.
One of the things that I don't particularly like to see is if something is particularly popular. And Alex, you brought up the Marvel films as an example, so I'll use those. There's a style of writing that they fell into a little bit of a rhythm with in those films, where everything that tonally, and there's a kind of a wit and a kind of a clap back and a slightly comedic tone that they found. I find that kind of drifted into a couple of games I played over the last sort of decade or so, just because something worked in one big franchise in that way. That does that mean that it can now be used in every single sort of science fiction / fantasy / video game? So I think that's something that I see that kind of winds me up a little bit. Is that kind of overuse or reuse, I guess, of a particular thing that has been successful in another medium. Usually Hollywood films, sometimes not. Sometimes even other video games, right? If some kind of trope or some sort of witticism was successful in some way, not necessarily in dialogue, but sometimes that tends to be how it manifests.
Yeah, that witty cadence thing is so grating. And that is an area where I think the executives are to blame, because they're going, we want this to work on TikTok. Yeah. We want a three sentence thing between two characters going, ho 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 ho, and do that over and over again. And then writers will just go, okay, we'll just do the cadence, and then that'll be it.
And that is one thing that I do think Baldur's Gate is guilty of. And,
do you think?
And I do think so. And I love it, don't get me wrong, but it is guilty of that. And Netflix does it now, writing so that your shows can be clipped and used on social media, right? And so all of Astarion's lines are basically like clip them up and use them in various contexts. It's almost like they wrote him with this idea that he was going to be a meme even before. But maybe I'm taking that a little bit too far, but I'm probably not wrong.
I can see it. I can see it in certain parts, like when you're walking around and maybe Shadowheart and Asterion have a little bit of back and forth. That's where I can see it, definitely. I want to ask a question. I was thinking about while we were talking. Does Uncharted fall into that category, or is it before this all started?
Nathan Drake's like one of the biggest, most popular gaming characters ever, but he is the blandest, saying absolutely nothing bland thing ever. And I can't remember anything he said.
Except for Croft.
I just remember, and and I just words that don't matter. But the gameplay is good enough and it looks good enough.
Do people go into Uncharted for the writing, or do they go into it for the set piece action?
Yeah.
I'd argue it was probably the latter, but I did enjoy the story, though. Don't get me wrong.
It's so strange that this is the same studio that made The Last of Us then. Because it goes, right, you know what they're capable of in terms of writing. But then that's a place where a writer can go, we don't need this to be massively deep. It just be a swashbuckling adventure.
I think that's the nail on the head right there, is I think that you definitely have writers who work for these studios who are more than capable of writing to genre, to type, to what they are given in terms of a brief. And if you're sat on the writing table and someone says, here's what we're doing, we're writing Uncharted, these are the parameters to which your main character must adhere, off you go. And you can, as a writer, I guess, internally be like, I do not want to do this. This is beneath me. Or I guess you can take your paycheck and suck it up. And I think that there's almost a kind of duality, I guess. If you're a staff writer at the BBC and you're writing episodes of EastEnders, churning those things out, you've got deadlines to hit, and every single conceivable story has already been told at the East End of London, I'm sure. So you have to almost rehash things, move things around, kind of. And I'm kind of sprawling a little bit with this. I think that's the point I'm making, is that if you're a writer and you're being paid to write, sometimes you're just going to have to suck up and write to a type.
That thing of it's the safest paycheck I think it's possible to earn, because you literally just have to do, for most like jobbing writers in these kinds of jobs, you just need to hit the word count. Because the hardest kind of writing is comedy, because you need to force the audience to laugh. With every other kind of writing, you don't need to force the audience to do anything. You just need to have words. And as long as you're putting words there, then you're going to keep on getting paid. And then if you're getting paid, then why rock the boat?
Has everyone seen the trailer or heard about Naughty Dog's next project after The Last of Us?
Oh, yeah. Is it intergalactic?
I can tell you.
It's too many it's.
It's wordy.
There's a heretic prophet in there somewhere.
Heretic prophet,
Intergalactic
yes.
heretic prophet.
Yeah. It's four words mushed together. But yeah, I'll be really interested to see what direction that goes in terms of writing, for sure. Because obviously you've got Uncharted, and that's very Uncharted-y. And then The Last of Us, completely different, obviously. And some of the best writing in gaming, I think, in terms of just the emotion of the whole thing. I wasn't sure what to make of it when I saw the trailer. It's very product placement heavy.
I don't know if they're doing a thing. I don't know if they're doing like a kind of satirical kind of comment on late stage capitalism, or it's just dumb and they've been paid lots of money to have product placement. I don't know which one it is, and I kind of really hope it's the former. But yeah,
you'd hope so from a studio like Naughty Dog. But then equally, the latter is also very possible that they've like fully sold out. I don't know. We shall see. But it was also very 80s as well. It's giving lots of 80s vibes.
I wonder if Neil Druckmann's going to be directing it, since that he's doing the Last of Us TV show now.
We shall have to wait. It'll probably be at least a couple of years away, I should think. But we'll pen that down as a future episode for sure.
Considering my
go on,
rant just now about
Yeah.
Marvel films, if there is any hint that it's got the same kind of dialogue structure as Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's all kind of tongue-in-cheek and witty and all that kind of stuff, I will be cross.
Yes, there is definitely a danger of that, I think. But you can't really tell anything from a first trailer. Things can change, can't they? Let's hope it's not. So I'm going to wrap up the episode, I think. So we'll have to come back because there's definitely more questions to ask that I haven't asked yet. But I want to know, I'll leave you with this question, I think. Can you have a good game, or any game really, without any writing in it at all?
I will go first with a simple point, but I think a fun one, which is it, of course, depends on what you want to play. Tetris is a great game, but I'm not particularly interested in the deep Tetris lore.
Is there deep Tetris lore?
There is, apparently. I think.
Apparently. Oh, I should have to look it up.
But I have heard. Yeah, obviously you can have good games with no writing, but we focus very much on the dialogue in our discussion today, and obviously writing is also about the whole story of the game. So even in a game where there's no dialogue, there will still be writing, even if it's not, you're not reading it, you're not having it spoken to you, but obviously there is a story there. And that is also part of the writing experience. So I think that we're talking about very simple games if you're taking out the writing. But I think games without dialogue, you can have some very good games without dialogue.
Plenty of games where if you removed all of the dialogue, the game would improve massively, like Space Marine 2. If there's a game that I want to play that the writing isn't particularly good, I'll change the voice language. So I played Horizon Forbidden West in Italian. And it's like playing a completely different game because it just makes it feel fresh. But if you removed all the dialogue from God of War, you'd be able to work out what was going on from the gameplay and the acting, and that's the biggest thing, I think, is the gameplay good enough to stand on its own without any writing, any dialogue. And if that's true, then you've made a great game. And then writing can only enhance that. And the thing that I remember that I wanted to say earlier, that I'll sound like a 15th century gentleman going, Shakespeare is the best at writing dialogue in history to me. There's Shakespeare and then there's George R.R. Martin. Those are my two biggest inspirations in terms of dialogue. And I just wish more people would write like Shakespeare. I think that's the perfect place to start because it's prose and it's poetry, and no one understands the human condition better than him. And I just if you made the Space Marines talk like Shakespeare, that'd be something.
I'm sure there's a game that's got Shakespearean type dialogue. I can't remember if I'm imagining it. I'm sure there's a murder mystery of some kind that you have to solve that's got either that or it's medieval. I can't remember. But there must be a game out there with some Shakespearean inspiration. Well, perhaps we'll find it for the next episode, Matt.
I will be very interested, Matt, if you have read any of the 40k novels. Because
the Warhammer ones.
Obviously, yes, not for now. But one day I must pick your brains about those because I could talk for ages about the quality of the writing and how you write characters to Warhammer 40k individuals.
Absolutely, yeah. Have you heard of Lutin, the YouTube channel?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I have listened to so much of that. Was my gateway into the 40k universe. I've never played it. I'd hope to at some point. Then recently I've listened to the first 4 audiobooks of the Horus Heresy books, and they make the Space Marines so interesting through the way they talk. It's this very Spartan dialogue, very like Kratos, and how you can have these, what are shown in the Space Marine games, these sort of these meathead, oh, kill the alien Xenos over there, and then that's as deep as they are. Whereas in the books and in the lore, they are fascinating, unique individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be as stupid as orcs fighting against bugs and go, yeah, that's cool. But then I think the Warhammer 40k universe is quite a transcendent example of writing when you think it's all based around like little figurines on a board.
Mm-hmm.
They really went hard for it.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Well, thank you everyone for your thoughts on this episode. It's been a fascinating look into writing for gaming and writing for games, and thank you very much for your thoughts. And I expect we'll probably come back to the topic again, because like I said, there's plenty more we could talk about, but we haven't done today. Like Jen mentioned, the world building and the story behind the game as well. So there's definitely more to explore, and we'd be happy to have you back on anytime, Chris. So thank you very much for joining us.
That's very flattering. Thank you very much, and thank you guys for accommodating me and putting up with my nonsense.
You're very welcome. So thank you very much for listening and watching. We hope you enjoyed as well. Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share? Just let your friends know, let anyone you think might be interested know, let us know what you thought, and we'll be back every Thursday with more episodes for you. So until then, we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.